To our amazing viewers at Midnight Affairs Tales, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. He told me he loved me with the same mouth he used to kiss her. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when my world cracked, not with thunder or drama, but with the soft ding of a message notification. I didn't look at his phone out of suspicion. I looked because it was there, face up, glowing on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. And when I saw her name pop up, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby," the floor beneath me didn't fall. No, it stayed perfectly still while everything inside me spiraled into something I didn't yet recognize. Fury wrapped in silence. That was the moment my soul shattered, not just from betrayal, but from the cruelty of how casually he broke me. His name was Carter. To the world, he was charming, successful, the kind of man who walked into rooms like he owned the air. To me, he was more. He was safety. He was laughter over cheap wine. He was the boy who brought soup when I was sick and kissed my forehead like I was fragile glass. And yet, there he was, with her, on messages I hadn't been meant to see. The worst part? I didn't even know her name. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I waited for the water to stop running, for the sound of the bathroom door to creak open. He came out smiling, towel slung over his shoulder like he'd just stepped out of an ad for cologne. I looked at him, memorized the curve of his smirk, and filed it away. That smirk would be the last thing I erased when the time came. "Everything okay?" he asked, brushing his hair back with one hand, his voice wrapped in false warmth. I smiled. "Yeah, everything's perfect." He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him. I let him touch the lips he'd ruined just moments earlier, and in that moment, something in me was born, not a plan, not yet, but the seed of it, the embryo of vengeance. For the next few weeks, I played the role of the doting girlfriend with Oscar-worthy precision. I laughed when I needed to. I touched him when he expected it. I even planned a weekend getaway for us, just so I could watch how deep his betrayal really ran. It turns out, very deep. Carter wasn't just cheating. He was collecting hearts like trophies, discarding them when the shine faded. I was just the latest antique in his growing collection. But I wasn't going to be thrown away. He thought he knew me. Sweet Emily. Quiet Emily. The kind of woman who forgives, swallows her hurt, and stays. He had no idea. The first thing I did was find out everything about the other woman, Allison. Blonde, mid-30s, worked at a local marketing firm. Divorced. Vulnerable. Just Carter's type. I didn't hate her. Not yet. For all I knew, she was another victim like me. But whether she knew about me or not didn't matter. She would be part of the collateral damage. I needed Carter to feel it. Not just lose me. I needed him to beg. I began journaling every interaction, recording every sweet lie he fed me like candy laced with arsenic. I documented his schedule, his passwords, his habits. He made it easy. He trusted me too much. Or maybe he just never thought I was capable of this kind of war. That would be his first mistake. The second, underestimating how far a broken heart can stretch before it snaps back. By month 2, I had enough to ruin him, socially, financially, emotionally. But I didn't strike. Not yet. I needed him to fall in love with me again. Deeper. I needed him to lower his defenses, believe he'd gotten away with it. So, I made him dinner every night, wore his favorite perfume, even started talking about the future. Marriage. Kids. The kind of things that made his eyes gleam with the illusion of control. He didn't know I'd already started peeling away his life like skin from a fruit. Credit card accounts were rerouted. His emails were cloned. I had every piece of dirt he'd ever tried to bury, sitting pretty in a digital folder named Freedom. And still, every night, he slept beside me. Still, he whispered, "I love you," without choking on the irony. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then came the night I saw them together in person. Allison, her hand in his, laughing like a woman who believed she mattered. That was when I knew she wasn't a victim. She was complicit. And just like Carter, she would learn that betrayal comes with interest. I went home that night and opened my laptop. It was time to begin. Revenge is never born in chaos. It's sculpted in silence. Every morning, Carter kissed me goodbye like I was a habit, sweet, predictable, and invisible. But beneath his routine was a lie so large, it no longer needed hiding. He was comfortable, arrogant, and that made him stupid. What he didn't know was that every step he took was already choreographed in my mind. I had mapped his entire day to the hour: coffee at 8:15, calls until 11, gym at 6, and her apartment on Tuesdays and Fridays by 8. He never stayed the night. That was his version of being respectful. Like adultery was acceptable as long as he tucked himself into our shared bed before midnight. I created a new email address under a false name, Clara Winslow. A background fabricated down to the last detail. She was the alias I used to contact Allison anonymously. The plan wasn't to reveal the affair. Not yet. The goal was to plant a seed of paranoia. One cryptic message at a time. The first email read, "You don't know who you're sleeping with. But you will." No signature. No context. Just enough to make her question everything. I sent it from a public Wi-Fi connection, then destroyed the device I used. There could be no trail. No digital fingerprints. Carter may have treated me like I was naive, but I'd spent the better part of the last 6 years absorbing everything about him, including how he handled secrets. By the next day, he was tense, paranoid. He paced more, checked his phone like it owed him something. At dinner, he brought up Allison casually, as if fishing for something. "She's having a rough week," he said between forkfuls. "Client stuff." I sipped my wine and nodded. Maybe she's just tired of being second. His eyes flicked up. "What?" I smiled. "I mean in work. Always playing catch-up." He nodded, but I knew he heard the real message. That was the first crack. And the best revenge is patient. It waits for the cracks to split the whole damn thing wide open. Phase 2 was more surgical. The letter. Handwritten. In ink. No fingerprints. No computer text to analyze. Just raw, shaky letters. As if written by a woman unraveling at the seams. It read, "Carter lied to me too. He always lies. He told me I was the only one. Then I found you. And I know about the others. You should ask him what happened in April 3 years ago. What he did to her." Again, no name. No sender. I mailed it directly to Allison's apartment using a courier I paid in cash. I knew Carter wouldn't tell her anything. He'd deny. Deflect. But the damage was done. That same week, I began leaving subtle clues around the house. Nothing obvious. Just enough for Carter to almost notice. A wine glass out of place. A receipt for lingerie he didn't buy. A text message on my phone that I'd conveniently leave unlocked for 5 minutes too long. The idea wasn't to confront him. It was to mirror him. Make him feel what I felt every time I saw her name light up his phone. And it worked. He started watching me. Not in the protective way he used to. No, this was different. He watched me like a man standing in a room he thought he knew. Only to realize the walls were moving. Then came the confrontation. Not from Carter. From Allison. She showed up at our house on a Saturday afternoon, mascara streaked, hair pulled back in fury. I was on the porch trimming dead leaves off the ivy Carter had planted when he first moved in with me. She stormed past the gate like she'd lived there her whole life. "You're Emily?" I stood, dirt on my gloves. "Depends who's asking." "I'm Allison. Carter's friend." The pause in her voice betrayed her. She didn't even believe her own words anymore. "Right?" I said, letting the silence stretch. "Friend." She blinked hard. "Did you send me that letter?" I tilted my head. "What letter?" "I know he's lying. But you. If this is some game to make me hate him, why would I do that?" I asked, feigning confusion. "I barely know you. Carter barely talks about you." That hit her like a slap. Her face fell just enough for me to see the vulnerability underneath. She didn't come for answers. She came hoping I'd confirm she still meant something to him. Poor thing. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Ask him about April. See if he flinches." And just like that, I walked inside. Carter came home 30 minutes later to a smashed coffee table and silence that could choke a man. He was unraveling, slowly, but not nearly enough. Next came the burner phone. I used it to text Carter at 3:12 a.m. while he lay beside me in bed. The message simply read, "She knows everything." I heard his breath hitch before he turned over, pretending to shift in his sleep. His heart was racing. I could hear it. He was beginning to drown in his own deception. And I was just watching the waves roll in. The climax was approaching, but it needed to be precise. One wrong step, and he could flee, deny, manipulate his way out. But I wasn't building a scandal. I was building a noose. And every lie he ever told me was one more knot in the rope. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can live with you, eat with you, sleep next to you, and never truly see you. Carter believed he still had the upper hand. Despite the tension, the broken glass, the questions he dodged, he walked around like a man with secrets neatly folded into his back pocket. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. I was the truth. And I was coming for him like a shadow with teeth. The morning after Allison's visit, Carter made breakfast. Pancakes, strawberries, black coffee, his version of peace offering. I sat at the counter, quiet, watching him fumble for normalcy. "So, about yesterday," he started. "Which part?" I asked, not even looking up from my plate. He smiled, tight, nervous. "Allison showing up like that? That wasn't okay." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." He waited for me to dig, to pry, to accuse. But silence. Silence unnerved him more than shouting ever could. He needed noise to control the story. I was giving him nothing, just like he'd given me for months. I leaned in, real calm. "Carter, who is Grace?" He froze. Subtle, but enough. "I don't know a Grace," he said too quickly. Wrong answer. I'd found the old emails in an archived folder he forgot to delete. Grace was his ex, the one he dated right before me, the one who, according to some dark corner of a forum post I'd found, disappeared for 6 months after breaking up with him. No trace, no explanation. And when she returned, she never spoke publicly about where she'd been. I kept my face neutral. He sipped his coffee. I smiled. That's when I knew. I wasn't his first heartbreak, but I would be his last. Over the next few days, I planted more seeds. Nothing explosive, just suggestions. An old pair of men's cufflinks on the nightstand. A voicemail from a fake male contact named Daniel, just static and a whisper. "Did you tell him yet?" I could see Carter unraveling like thread from a fraying sleeve. He stopped sleeping, snapped at little things, began double-locking his office door. He was no longer the predator. He was the hunted. He just hadn't realized the cage had already been built around him. One evening, he came home early and asked me if I was seeing someone else. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "What makes you think that?" "You're different," he said. "You've been cold." I laughed. It wasn't fake. It bubbled up from somewhere real. Maybe I just realized who I'm actually in bed with. His jaw clenched. "Emily, if something's wrong," "What's wrong?" I interrupted. "Is that you think this is still about you." I walked away before he could respond. Let him stew. Let him imagine. Let the walls close in. Meanwhile, I reached out to someone I never thought I'd contact, Grace. Finding her wasn't hard. She lived off-grid, changed her last name, worked under a new identity. But I found a photo of her from a volunteer project overseas, and from there, traced her to a bookstore in a remote town 3 states away. I didn't call. I went there. She recognized me the second I walked through the door. I saw the fear flash across her face like lightning across a dark sky. "You're with him," she whispered. I said, "I think you can help me end it." We sat in the back room of the store, surrounded by dusty shelves and the smell of old pages. She was hesitant at first, traumatized, but slowly, the dam cracked. She told me everything. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the subtle threats disguised as jokes. The way Carter made her believe she was crazy for questioning him, until she stopped questioning entirely, until she disappeared into herself, into silence, into a shell. That was when I decided this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. Grace handed me an old flash drive. "He recorded everything," she said. "Calls, messages, He used them to twist reality. My stomach dropped. Why would he keep that? Power, she said. Leverage. I took the drive, hugged her, and promised I'd make sure he never hurt anyone again. When I got home, Carter was waiting for me on the porch, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. Where were you? He asked. Somewhere you can't erase, I said, walking past him. That night, while he slept, I listened to the files. And what I heard, he didn't just cheat. He ruined people. Dozens of conversations, recordings of private breakdowns, intimate confessions weaponized for control. He was building an empire of manipulation, and I had all the blueprints now. By morning, I wasn't just Emily. I was the reckoning. And Carter? He had one heartbeat left before the storm. Have you ever looked at someone and realized you never truly knew them at all? That's what happened the morning I listened to the last audio file on that flash drive. It was dated 2 years before Carter and I met. The voice on the other end was crying, soft, broken sobs of a woman unraveling. Her name was Sasha. She mentioned being pregnant. And Carter? He laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A cold, mechanical one. Like her pain was entertainment. Like the life growing inside her was just another inconvenience he could delete. Handle it, or I'll handle you, he said on the recording. And believe me, Sasha, I'm better at erasing problems than you think. I sat there, frozen. The weight of who he truly was crushing down like a cinder block on my chest. It was never about me. It was never about any of us. We were just chapters in the book he never planned to finish reading. That's when I realized this wasn't a man cheating on a girlfriend. This was a predator. I burned the flash drive. Not to destroy the evidence. I'd already copied it to 3 encrypted clouds under aliases he couldn't trace. I burned it as a ritual. The girl who once loved Carter, who dreamed of his last name, his children, his forever, that girl died with those ashes. And what rose from it wasn't a woman scorned. She was an executioner. I knew what I had to do. It was time to expose him, but not with a scandal. That would be too easy, too clean. He'd twist it, spin the narrative, maybe even play the victim. No, I needed him to feel it, to live it, to beg. The next phase started with Allison. I sent her an anonymous package. Inside, a printed transcript of Carter's call with Sasha. Highlighted. Annotated. I didn't include the audio. That would come later. I just wanted her to read it first. To let her imagination fill the spaces between each chilling line. She would question her choices. She would see the monster under the mask. Then, I went after his career. Carter worked in finance, executive level. Clean image, trusted face. His reputation was his currency. I leaked portions of his manipulative recordings to an anonymous whistleblower forum frequented by journalists. Not enough to trace back to me, just enough to start a storm. By the following Monday, rumors were circulating in his firm. Whispers in boardrooms. Cold stares from coworkers. He knew something was off, but not what. I watched him spiral from behind the curtain. He stayed home from work 3 days in a row. He started drinking. One night, he asked me outright, "Do you think someone's trying to ruin me?" I smiled, sipping my tea. Maybe they're just showing people who you really are. He looked at me like he saw a ghost. And in a way, he did. Because the woman he remembered, soft-spoken, devoted, naive, she was long gone. Carter began digging through his own life, searching for holes, betrayals, enemies. He changed his passwords, canceled credit cards, stopped seeing Allison entirely. He was spiraling, and still, I stayed silent. But silence wasn't enough anymore. He needed to break. So, I gave him a gift. On the day we were supposed to celebrate our 3rd anniversary, I left him a small box on the bed. Inside, a thumb drive and a note. You always loved listening to yourself talk. Enjoy. No name. No emotion. Just cold truth. On the drive was one recording, the conversation with Sasha. The one where he threatened her. The one that proved, without question, who he was. I waited outside the house, in the car, engine running. I watched through the window as he sat on the bed, opened the box, plugged in the drive. I watched his face change, from confusion to recognition, then horror. He dropped the drive like it burned him. Then he cried. Not a single tear. Not a sniffle. He cried. Like a man seeing his own ghost. Like someone who finally realized the darkness he'd tried to bury had never left. It had just waited. I drove away before he could spot me. I didn't need to see what happened next. Because the war was already won. Or so I thought. The next morning, Carter was gone. Not in a normal way. Not a note. Not a packed bag. Just gone. His car was in the driveway. His phone was on the kitchen table. But he wasn't in the house. I searched every room. No signs of struggle. No blood. Just the eerie stillness of a man who had evaporated. For the first time in months, I felt the fear. Was he running? Or was he hunting? That night, I got a call. Blocked number. A voice, distorted. Did you think you were the only one playing games? Click. Silence. That was the moment I realized. Carter hadn't lost. He'd adapted. And now, the real game had begun. Fear doesn't scream. It whispers. It coils in the corners of your mind, slipping into moments of calm like smoke under a door. That's what it felt like after Carter vanished. An invisible pressure, a tightness in my lungs that no amount of logic could release. He was gone, and yet everywhere. His cologne still lingered in our bedroom. His toothbrush sat untouched, like he'd be back any second. But I knew better. This wasn't a man who left in panic. He was watching, waiting, and I couldn't afford to flinch. I stayed in the house for appearances, for control. But I didn't sleep there. I rotated between hotels, changed routines, wore wigs in public. I erased patterns. Carter had taught me how predators think, and I wasn't about to become prey in the final act of my own story. The days were quiet, but the nights? The nights were theater. I rehearsed revenge like a script, memorized each line, each cue. I kept a voice recorder on at all times, in case he tried to confront me. I started training, too, self-defense, knife work, even range time with a borrowed firearm from a friend who didn't ask questions. Vengeance wasn't just emotional anymore. It was tactical. Then came the package. No name. No return address. Just a simple white box on my doorstep, one I knew had never passed through a postal system. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. Me. At the grocery store. 3 days earlier. A red circle drawn around my head in marker. No note. Just that. I stared at it for an hour, memorizing the angle, the shadow, the timestamp in the corner. He was close. Too close. And I'd underestimated how deeply Carter had changed when his mask finally cracked. I started tracing his digital footprints. His emails were gone, bank accounts frozen, phone disconnected. But I did find something. A forum. Obscure. Private. Hidden behind layers of encryption and fake credentials. It was a place where people shared methods of manipulation, psychological warfare, disappearances. And Carter had posted there. Not under his name, of course. But the language was his, precise, smug, dressed in charm. One thread stood out. How do you erase a woman who thinks she's smarter than you? He listed steps. Not actions he would take. Actions he already had. You let her believe she's winning. You let her see you fall apart. You feed her silence until her own mind does the damage. Then, when she's standing on the ashes of your lies, you strike. That thread was posted 12 days ago. He was following a script of his own. And worse, he knew I'd find it. He wanted me to. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about breaking me. I called Grace. Told her everything. Her voice shook as she said, "That's exactly what he did to me." Made me think I had the upper hand. Then he took everything. We decided it was time to go public. Together. We set up an anonymous account with a drop of every recording, every transcript, every documented interaction. All names were redacted. We didn't post it yet, but it was ready. A dead man's switch. If anything happened to either of us, it would go live. We looped in 2 other women Carter had targeted, survivors who were willing to speak out, if it came to that. But I didn't want justice through sympathy. I wanted Carter to feel what he made us feel. So I turned the stage around. I staged my own breakdown. At the coffee shop where I knew one of Carter's old colleagues would be, I accidentally spilled a folder of printed therapy notes. Fake, but believable. I muttered to myself. Cried. Shook. I made sure the performance traveled. Within a day, the whispers started. Emily's not doing well. She's been acting off. I heard she's losing it since Carter left. Perfect. Now I was no longer a threat. I was just a broken woman. Exactly what he wanted me to be. And when people underestimate you, that's when you strike. I returned to the house the next week. Made noise about wanting closure. Told Carter's old friends I was cleaning out his things. I made sure it looked messy. Half-packed boxes, empty bottles, dishes piling up. Fate. That night, I left a single lamp on in the living room, the rest of the house dark. I played soft music, his favorite old record, scratched and slow. And then, I waited. Not for hours. For days. I slept elsewhere. But every evening, I returned. Set the stage. Turned on the music. Left the front door unlocked just enough to look accidental. Until one night, it finally happened. I arrived at 3:17 a.m., parked 2 blocks away, crept through the back gate. The lamp was off. The record was stopped. Inside, a half-eaten apple sat on the counter. Still fresh. No fingerprints. He was too careful for that. But that wasn't the message. The message was what I found taped to the wall. A single sentence, handwritten in ink I knew well. You rehearsed revenge. I perfected it. That's when I knew Carter wasn't just back. He was inside the final act. And I'd already stepped onto his stage. War with a man like Carter couldn't be won with truth. He didn't fear truth. He feared exposure, humiliation, loss of control. And that's exactly where I aimed next, right between the eyes of his ego. The note he left taped to the wall. You rehearsed revenge. I perfected it. Wasn't just a threat. It was an invitation. A taunt. Carter believed he was in control again, that he'd spun the wheel back in his favor. But what he didn't know, what he never realized, was that his return had triggered the final phase of a plan I'd built piece by bitter piece. While he'd been perfecting manipulation, I had been perfecting exposure. I went into his old office the next morning, his private study, which he hadn't used in weeks. I knew he'd return there eventually, and so I had left something small, hidden, a flash drive tucked beneath the drawer liner. It wasn't about the content, it was about the trap. A virus, custom-coded by a friend from college who owed me a favor. The moment Carter accessed the drive, the software would clone everything on the device used to open it. Every new email, every message, every login. I'd see it all. And 2 hours later, my screen lit up. He'd used a burner laptop. The files began flowing in. Emails under an alias. A hidden inbox with draft messages never sent, but clearly meant for someone close. And then I saw it. Plans. Detailed ones. For me. Maps of our home. My routine. Even snippets of voicemails I thought I'd deleted years ago. He'd been watching for months, not just since the fallout. He'd never stopped. The entire time I thought I was executing a plan. I was inside his. But here's what Carter never accounted for. He wasn't the only one who evolved. That night, I set the second trap. I texted Allison from a new number. I told her I had proof Carter was planning to vanish again, and this time, he wouldn't leave her with any explanation, just ruin. To my surprise, she responded within minutes. She was in. Furious. Hurt. Desperate for closure, for vengeance. And more importantly, she had something I didn't. Access. Unbeknownst to Carter, Allison had made a copy of his personal safe key back when she still believed he loved her. Inside that safe were documents, backups, possibly more recordings, maybe even leverage. Together, we planned the hit. Not physical, not legal. Psychological. The safe was located in a storage unit Carter still rented under a secondary name, J. Malone, his mother's maiden name. I had found it on a statement weeks prior, but hadn't touched it yet. Now, Allison had the final piece. We broke in at 2:07 a.m. No alarms. Inside, folders, drives, a notebook. That notebook, it was his mind in ink. A twisted blueprint of manipulation, quotes, timelines, aliases, notes on the women he'd hurt, ranked by emotional malleability. My name? Number 1. Under it, in pencil. Too clever for long-term play. Watch her. She suspects. I laughed. Allison cried. We scanned everything. Posted none of it. Not yet. Because the real hit was still coming. The first blood Carter wouldn't see was from one of his own. 2 days later, Allison invited him to meet. She told him she needed to talk. That she was scared. That she missed him. Of course, he came. They met at her place. Candlelight. Wine. Just like old times. I watched from the feed I'd hidden in the corner lamp earlier that day. The audio was crystal clear. Do you still love me? She asked, her voice trembling just enough. Carter laughed. That's not really the question, is it? She leaned in. Then what is? He paused. And like the narcissist he was, he couldn't help himself. It's whether you'll ever understand how much I've let you believe was your idea. And there it was. Confession. No prompt. No pressure. Just pride. He admitted to lying, manipulating, erasing women like chapters in a novel he got bored reading. It was all there. On camera. On audio. Framed with soft jazz and the faint glow of wine glasses. The trap snapped shut. Allison smiled. You should go now. Carter blinked. What? I got what I needed. He stood abruptly. What the hell is this? She handed him a piece of paper. Not the recording. Not a threat. Just a message. Your legacy dies tomorrow. That was the final fracture. He shoved the chair. Stormed out. Furious. Confused. And behind him, he left everything that mattered. The next morning, I dropped a package at the doorstep of every executive board member at his firm. Anonymous. Clean. Containing a flash drive with the recording, a transcript, a list of verified aliases he used, a folder labeled Intent to Manipulate, High-Risk Targets by noon. Carter's name was scrubbed from the company website. By 3 p.m., his accounts were frozen. By 5, his face was on news blogs under the headline, Executive Caught in Disturbing Web of Manipulation. And yet, he didn't run. He didn't disappear. He called. Blocked number. Again. You think you've won? He said, voice brittle. I didn't answer. Emily, he said, quieter, colder. You drew blood. Congratulations. But now it's my turn. And that's when I heard it. Not in his voice. In the background. My front door creaking open. The click of the call ended. And then, silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that crawls under your skin, whispering that something's wrong. I was 2 blocks away, watching everything through the hidden cameras I'd installed after the last time Carter slipped through. The feed on my laptop showed the front door swinging open, slowly, deliberately, no kick, no force. He had a key. He'd made a copy. The living room was dark, just the faint hum of the standing lamp I left on to bait him. He stepped in like he'd done it 100 times, slow, cautious, not with fear, but with certainty. He thought I was home. He wanted me to be. That was the first real mistake he made. Because this time, I wasn't following his script. I was writing my own. I called the police, voice steady, calm, reporting a break-in in progress. I gave no names, just an address. I knew they wouldn't arrive in time, and I wasn't counting on them to. This wasn't about justice. This was about revelation. On the screen, I watched him move room to room, checking drawers, the closet, my bedside table. He paused when he saw the wine glass on the nightstand, lipstick smeared, still damp. I'd planted it that morning. Let him believe I'd been here. Let him want to find me. But all he found was a letter, placed neatly under the pillow, addressed to him. He opened it. Read it. His hands trembled. You once asked what it would take to erase me. The answer? Nothing. You're not erasing me, Carter. I erased you. He tore the letter in half, screamed, an animal sound, guttural and broken. And then he laughed. Not loudly. Not even confidently. It was a frayed laugh. A man on the edge, realizing the ground beneath him had never been solid. But he didn't leave. Instead, he sat down on my bed and waited. I didn't return to the house that night. I watched him sit there for hours, motionless, like a statue of denial. He left just before sunrise, stumbling out the door like a ghost trying to outrun the sun. I returned later that morning. The bed still smelled like him. The wine glass still shimmered with a trace of my trap. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt cold. Because for all the chaos I had orchestrated, one thing was becoming dangerously clear. I was starting to enjoy it. Not the justice, not the exposure, but the control. The same intoxication Carter once lived off. I could taste it now. I'd become everything he feared I was capable of. And maybe worse. That's when the letter arrived. Not an email, not a message, a real letter. Typed, formal, delivered to my P.O. box. You've won the world over, Emily. You're clever, relentless, and oh so public. But remember what spiders forget. When you spin a web wide enough, you can't always control what gets caught. Some things you'll wish had stayed hidden. There was no name, but there didn't need to be. It was from Carter, or someone loyal to him. Attached was a photo, not of me, of Grace, at her new job, smiling, talking to a customer. The implication was clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. I called Grace immediately. No answer. I tried 3 more times. Still nothing. Panic isn't loud. It's paralyzing. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to her shop. 45 minutes away. I didn't remember most of the road. Just the echo of that letter in my mind. You'll wish it stayed hidden. When I arrived, the store was closed. Not unusual, it was early. But her car was out front. I knocked. No answer. I circled the building. Tried the back door. Locked. Then I saw it. A single window cracked open. I climbed through and found Grace inside. Alive. But barely. She was slumped against the back wall of the office, breathing shallow, eyes fluttering. There was no blood, no visible wounds, just a syringe on the floor beside her, and an open box labeled vitamin kits, overturned. I called 911, hands shaking. She survived, but only just. The doctors said it was a paralytic, something rare, slow-acting, designed to induce fear more than damage. Whoever did this wanted her awake for it. Conscious. Aware. That's when it hit me. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was retribution. Carter wasn't just reacting. He was punishing. And I had no idea how far he'd go. Grace recovered slowly, and though her body healed, her spirit trembled. She no longer wanted to fight. No more exposure. No more statements. She backed out of the plan, deleted her testimonies, erased her name from our files. And I couldn't blame her. She wasn't built for war. But I was. Still, something shifted. A new emotion crept into my chest. Not rage, not fear. Guilt. Had I dragged others into this for justice? Or just to validate my own spiral? I went back home that night and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. The face looking back didn't resemble the woman Carter had broken. It resembled the one who'd burned down his kingdom. And standing in the silence, tangled in my own web, I whispered, "Have I become him?" The next morning, I woke up to find my laptop screen on. I hadn't left it open. A message blinked in the center. One file, titled, Confession_IO_final, and just one line below it. Play this, and the last piece falls. But not the way you think. I stared at the file on the screen like it was a ticking bomb. Confession_IO_final. The name alone was a dare. Carter wasn't just dropping breadcrumbs. He was challenging me, daring me to press play, daring me to believe I was still the one holding the leash. But we both knew better. I clicked it anyway. The audio began with static, then breathing, a pause, and his voice, calm, unhurried. If you're listening to this, congratulations. You've beaten me. You've dragged every skeleton into daylight and danced on their bones. You exposed the past. You made me bleed. But now I get to tell you the part you missed. My stomach tightened. There's something you never asked, Emily. Not once. Not through all your rage, your plans, your perfect little crusade. Why I chose you. Silence. A beat of pure stillness. And then, you weren't just another girl. You were the prototype, the masterpiece, the one I couldn't manipulate. So I decided to study you, to test you, to break you. Not for fun, not for sport, but because I wanted to understand what makes strength turn to obsession. What makes a woman like you become someone like me? I froze. This wasn't a confession. It was a blueprint. I didn't record you for leverage. I recorded you because I admired you. Every time you got suspicious, every time you pushed back, every time you refused to go down the path I laid out, I recorded it. And now, I've shared those files. My heart sank. People think they know your story, but I've curated a second version. One where you're not the victim, not the hero. One where you're just unwell. He chuckled, low and confident. Paranoia is a lovely shade on you, Emily. Especially when it's true. The audio cut out. I sat motionless. It all clicked in an instant. The missing hard drives from the storage unit, the therapists who ghosted me, the odd looks I'd begun getting from former allies, from my own friends. The ones who once applauded me had gone silent lately. He had rewritten the script again. I was no longer the woman who exposed Carter Blake. I was the unstable ex-girlfriend with an imagination and an axe to grind. And the terrifying part? I couldn't disprove it. He'd used my own war tactics against me, twisting every calculated move into erratic behavior. He painted my planning as obsession, my traps as delusion, my justice as hysteria. And if he'd done it well enough, I'd look like the villain. I opened the drive archives. He hadn't lied. There were videos, edits of me pacing, planning, whispering to myself late at night. No context, just enough to look unhinged. There were emails out of sequence, voice memos, snippets of calls, sliced just enough to twist the truth. And worse, there were names on a mailing list. People I once trusted, co-workers, journalists, even two of the survivors who had backed out. He sent it to them all. And as the fog of realization set in, I got the email. Subject: "This is who you're believing?" It was from a reporter who once begged for exclusive rights to my story. Inside were two attachments, one of my recordings, one of his curated video files. No text, just the footage, side by side. Even I looked guilty. I called the journalist. No answer. I sent a follow-up. Silence. That night, I lost 3 more followers on the anonymous account we'd used to share Carter's exposure campaign. The comments turned from support to suspicion. One read, "Maybe she's not as innocent as she says." And then another, "He may be a monster, but she's clearly not stable." Carter didn't just retaliate. He inverted the battlefield. My arsenal had become his evidence. I considered pulling back, deleting the files, scrubbing my tracks. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The virus he'd planted was already spreading. My face was already shifting in the public mind from survivor to specter. But then, I remembered the safe. There was one piece left. One Carter didn't know I had. In the lining of his old briefcase, I had found a second notebook. Smaller, torn, hidden behind stitched fabric. In it were detailed notes, not about me, but about someone else. A man named Nolan. The name had come up once before, in an email I dismissed. Carter had called him the only failure worth fearing. I dug deeper. Nolan was a former friend, a former partner, someone Carter had used, then betrayed. The notes hinted at something bigger, financial theft, intellectual property, maybe worse. And it clicked. If I couldn't win this fight with my story anymore, I'd win it with his. Nolan had disappeared 5 years ago, but not completely. I traced him through offshore accounts, buried social handles, and finally, one burner email with a single line. "If you're asking about Carter Blake, you've got my attention." I replied instantly. Within hours, Nolan responded with a phone number and a message. "You want to burn him down? I've got gasoline." He wasn't offering sympathy. He was offering collateral. And maybe, just maybe, the piece that would finally flip the game. But before I could call him, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed. No one there. Just a package. Small. Black. No markings. Inside, a USB drive. And a note. "Use this, and your secrets come out too." The war was no longer about revenge. It was survival. I didn't touch the USB drive. Not immediately. I stared at it for hours, trying to decide whether it was a trap, A bluff? Or worse, the final stroke in Carter's painting of me as a woman unraveling at her own hands. The note was clear. Use this, and your secrets come out too. The problem? I didn't know what secrets he meant. Had I gone too far? Had I crossed lines that could no longer be explained as strategy? Maybe I had, but so had he. And the difference between us wasn't action, it was intent. He wanted destruction. I wanted clarity. Power, maybe, but clarity first. And I was about to take it back. I finally called Nolan. His voice was gravel and ash, someone who had lived through Carter's brand of betrayal and built a life in the shadows afterward. I've been waiting for this call for 5 years, he said. I thought he was dead. No, I said. He's worse. He's thriving. There was silence on the other end. Then, let's change that. Nolan had kept everything. Emails, contracts, transfer receipts. He wasn't trying to ruin Carter because of a bruised ego. Carter had stolen millions from a joint startup Nolan had built. Wiped him out. Faked his signature. Fled with the money and left Nolan framed. The evidence was bulletproof. And more than that, it was corporate. Federal. A single leak could have Carter buried in courtrooms for a decade. But I didn't send it out. Not yet. Instead, I planned a dinner. An invitation. Face to face. One final performance. It was the only card I had left that he wouldn't expect me to play. I sent Carter a message through the same channel he'd used to threaten me. For words, let's end this properly. He responded within an hour. Dinner. Neutral ground. No games. I picked the place. An old Italian restaurant we used to visit during the early days, before everything rotted. It was dim, quiet, anonymous. No cameras. No security. He arrived first. Of course, when I walked in, he stood to greet me like nothing had ever happened, like we were still two people pretending to love each other. He wore a navy suit, crisp, eyes calm, lips curved in that familiar smirk, the kind that once melted me. Now it only made me nauseous. Emily, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. You look alive. I sat without replying. The waiter approached. Carter ordered red wine for both of us. I waited until the glasses were poured before speaking. I found Nolan, I said. A flicker crossed his face, barely noticeable, but I saw it. The one crack in the armor. You've been busy, he replied, sipping. So have you, I said. The false narratives, the edited clips, the mass emails, quite the campaign. He chuckled. Perception is everything. I leaned in. That's why I invited you here. I want to give you something. He raised an eyebrow. I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, a single USB drive. Not the one he sent me. Mine. It contained everything Nolan had given me. All the fraud. All the receipts. Everything that could destroy him on a level deeper than his ego. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. His fingers tightened around the envelope. If this goes public, I said quietly, you'll never walk into another boardroom again. You'll be unhireable, broke, maybe even in prison. He stared at me, and I smiled. It doesn't have to. Not if you disappear. He laughed. You think this scares me? He asked. You think I haven't built an escape for every outcome? You always think 5 moves ahead, I said. But I'm not playing chess. Then what is this? I raised my glass. Checkmate, Carter. But with fire. I drank slowly. He stared at me. Then he sipped his wine. And paused. Subtle. His jaw clenched. He lowered the glass. You drugged me. I shook my head. I don't need to. But I did switch the glasses. He looked at mine, then at his. Then at me. I reached into my coat and pulled out the original USB, the one he had sent me. I dropped it in my glass, the wine bubbling faintly as the drive sank. I never looked, I said. Whatever you thought I was afraid of, I let it die. His face tightened. You're bluffing. Am I? He stood, wobbled. Not from drugs. From rage. You think you win because of one file. No, I said. I win because you showed up. I stood and nodded toward the waiter, who was already on the phone. I had tipped him 2 hours in advance to call a contact at the local SEC branch the second Carter arrived. Proof of presence for a meeting tied to financial fraud. Carter didn't know that yet. He left first, unsteady but composed. I followed 10 minutes later. By the time I got home, Nolan had messaged me. The first subpoena goes out tomorrow. I opened a bottle of cheap champagne I'd been saving. Not to celebrate, but to mark the moment. Because this wasn't the end. It was the spark. Carter would fight back. That I knew. But his world was now burning. And in the middle of the smoke, he'd find one last letter. Delivered that night. Typed. Crisp. Simple. Some people collect hearts. I collect endings. Yours is still being written. Carter didn't vanish this time. No more running. No more cryptic messages or shadowed threats. He faced the storm like a man who believed he could outshout the thunder. But the subpoenas came anyway. One by one, piece by piece, his empire collapsed. Bank accounts frozen. Internal audits triggered. His former company disavowed him. The media turned ruthless, dragging every past indiscretion into the light. Some reporters called him a manipulator. Others called him a sociopath. But the headlines that mattered most weren't about what he did. They were about what he'd lost. His credibility. His legacy. His name. The footage of our dinner, recorded discreetly through a hidden pin camera, circulated in underground forums before reaching public media. He'd admitted enough on camera to raise eyebrows in all the right offices. Not direct confession, but arrogance that read like guilt to anyone paying attention. The video went viral under one caption: "When the devil thinks he's untouchable." I didn't post it. Nolan did. I didn't even know he had access to it. But in hindsight, it didn't matter. Carter had become the face of his own undoing. Still, he tried. He launched counter lawsuits. Claimed libel. Called me unstable. Claimed the files were edited, the interviews scripted. He even found a doctor, paid, no doubt, to testify that I showed signs of obsessive-compulsive paranoia. The court didn't buy it, because I had already filed first. And I had everything. The recordings, the notebooks, the witnesses. Though Grace had withdrawn, Allison had come back, emboldened by the avalanche. Others surfaced too. Women we didn't even know existed. A college intern. A former assistant. One of his ex-therapists, who had never spoken publicly before. They all told the same story. Gaslighting. Control. Quiet destruction. Carter's narrative didn't just crack. It imploded. And still, he showed up at every deposition. Calm. Smiling. Like a man waiting for his opponent to blink. But I didn't blink. Not even once. Until the day the letter arrived. Not typed. Not stamped. Handwritten. Delivered by courier to my doorstep. Addressed only to Emily. Inside, they may believe you now. But what will you do when the crowd grows bored of you? When you're no longer the righteous flame, just another woman with a grudge and no spotlight? Who will you become then? It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. And damn him, it worked. Because that night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, alone, the hum of the television playing another segment about the Blake conspiracies, and I realized something no one warns you about. Winning doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like void. I had taken everything from him. But I'd also given something away. The years I spent plotting. The people I'd pushed away. The moments I could never get back. Carter had broken me. But in breaking him, I'd built something darker inside myself. I looked at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. The Emily who started this war was gone. In her place stood someone colder. Sharper. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit like him. Then came the news I didn't expect. Carter had vanished. Not metaphorically this time. Literally. Missed his court appearance. Last seen at a private airstrip, though the flight manifest was redacted. No clear record. No follow-up. Gone. Like a final act before the curtain fell. There were rumors, of course. He fled to South America. He faked his own death. He bribed his way into a new identity. But the one rumor that chilled me the most? That he didn't run. That someone silenced him before the system could. And the final nail? An envelope delivered to the judge presiding over his case. No return address. Inside, a USB. The last known recording of Carter Blake. If this reaches you, it means I lost. Or maybe I just stopped playing. But let this be known. Emily didn't win. She just forgot what losing looks like. It ended with a laugh. Then static. They ruled it in my favor. Of course. But I never celebrated. Instead, I locked the doors, closed the blinds, and waited. Because when the devil cries your name, you don't answer. You prepare. It was over. That's what they kept telling me. The lawyers, the journalists, even the strangers who flooded my inbox with congratulations and virtual applause. You did it. You beat him. You survived. But surviving isn't winning. And peace? Peace is a lie people tell you when they're tired of your war. Weeks passed. No signs of Carter. No new threats. Just silence. Thick. Artificial. The kind that doesn't settle, it waits. I tried to return to normal life, if you could even call it that. Grocery stores. Emails. Quiet dinners alone. But everywhere I turned, there was a shadow shaped like him. A whisper. A breath. A ghost with my name on its lips. Then, one night, it wasn't a ghost. It was him. I came home late, arms full of takeout, the hallway light flickering like something from a dream I'd had too many times. The lock on my door was undisturbed, the alarm still armed. I stepped inside, and he was there, sitting in the chair by the window like a painting that refused to fade. Carter. Alive. Thin. Gaunt. His beard grown in, eyes sunken, yet still glittering with that same poison charm. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. Just silence. Long muted. I set the takeout down slowly, never breaking eye contact. Finally, he said, "You look tired." I replied, "You look dead." He smiled. "You ruined me, Emily." "No," I said. "You did that all by yourself." His gaze dropped for a moment, to the floor, then back up. Something was different now. Not just the weight loss. Not the tone. Something deeper. Carter Blake was cracked. Not broken, not yet, but close. And that's when he stood. I reached for the drawer behind me, slowly. The one with the kitchen knife I'd placed there after the last time I thought he might come back. He raised a hand. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Too late for that," I said. He nodded, as if conceding a point in chess. Then, suddenly, he stepped forward. Too fast. I pulled the drawer, but before I could grab the knife, he lunged. Not a full attack, something more desperate. Wild. He grabbed my wrist, slammed me against the counter. "You wanted to make me beg," he snarled. "You will," I spat. And that's when I drove my knee into his ribs. He crumpled, not because it was the hardest hit, but because he was weak. Starved. Fragile in a way I'd never seen. He hit the floor, gasping. I didn't stop. I kicked again. Once. Twice. Felt the crack. Heard the breath leave him. I stood over him, chest heaving, years of rage boiling beneath my skin. He looked up, coughing, blood in his teeth. You really became me." "No," I said. "You never begged." His eyes widened. I crouched down beside him, slow, careful. "You taught me one thing," I whispered. "Power isn't in the hit. It's in the hesitation." He tried to sit up. Failed. I stood and called emergency services. Told them a trespasser had broken in and injured himself. Told them I was afraid for my life. Didn't lie. Didn't embellish. When they arrived, he was barely conscious. But he was breathing. He'd live. And he'd face the final court date after all. But not as the predator. Not as the man who owned the room. As the man in a hospital bed, ribs broken, wrists cuffed. The media ate it up. Fallen executive caught in final breakdown. I didn't give interviews. Didn't smile. Didn't post. Because winning wasn't sweet. It was just quiet. Carter was sentenced a month later. Fraud, extortion, witness intimidation. Years in prison. No chance of parole for the first 5. But the last time I saw him wasn't in the courtroom. It was from across a hallway in the courthouse, through glass. He was in a wheelchair, one arm still bound in a brace. He looked at me and mouthed a single word. "Why?" And I mouthed back, "Because I wanted you to remember how it feels when breath is no longer yours to keep." He didn't look away, but he didn't look at me again either. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. They say revenge doesn't heal. Maybe they're right, but it does clear the air. And after years of walking through smoke, sometimes all you need is one breath, uncontaminated, unchoked, finally your own. Carter Blake is gone now. Not dead. Worse, forgotten. His name is sealed in court transcripts and whisper threads online, but not in headlines anymore. The world moved on. People always do. He's just another villain with a tragic backstory, reduced to footnotes and rumors. But me? I'm still here, still breathing. And for the first time in years, I'm breathing on my terms. I kept one of his old watches, the one he wore the night we first met. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Time is a strange thing. It doesn't heal wounds. It just reveals which ones were meant to scar. Mine did. But those scars? They're beautiful now. Every heartbeat that once raced in fear now ticks with purpose, with power. I no longer flinch at shadows. I no longer whisper in empty rooms. I sleep with both eyes closed. Because I earned that peace. Brick by brick. Bruise by bruise. And if you're listening to this, wondering if the war was worth it, just remember, sometimes you have to become the storm to survive the flood. This wasn't just a story about heartbreak. It was a story about reclamation. About a girl who was torn apart for sport and rebuilt herself from the wreckage. Stronger, sharper, unforgiving. So if you felt every twist in your bones, if your pulse raced when mine did, then do one thing for me. Like, share, subscribe. Not for me. For every heartbeat that ever had to learn the rhythm of revenge. Because sometimes justice doesn't knock. It whispers your name and waits for you to answer. Story is finished.